Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome back. My name is Chef Nolan from Parade Restaurant at the Happy Valley Clubhouse, and today we're making mushroom risotto. This series of videos is meant to be inspiring. It's meant to offer tips and tricks from these chefs of the clubhouse so that you can apply them at home and hopefully impress a few people of your own. So without further ado, let's get started. This mushroom risotto really is based on the foundation of great cooking. Learn the technique, practice, use great ingredients, and you're sure to have great results. So for our mushroom risotto, we have a great selection of different mushrooms here today. We have some orangi mushrooms, some white button mushrooms or Paris mushrooms, and we have these chicken leg. Now, the thing about mushrooms come in and out of season throughout the year. You have a wide range of mushrooms, both at the wet market and at your local supermarkets. So don't feel that you need to confine yourself into one type of mushroom. Really play around with the textures, the flavors of different seasonal mushrooms. You can even work in some dry mushrooms if you want, just simply reconstitute them in water. Now today for our mushrooms, I want to have texture because in a moment we're going to caramelize them in a frying pan, and I want to get a golden brown crunch to them, and offering as much texture and surface area to that mushroom to get golden brown will really improve our flavor of our risotto. So button mushrooms today, just simply give them a quarter. Our shimiji mushrooms, orangis, whatever you have, keep them nice and long. Keep the caps intact and just cut right down to the base of that root, okay? These mushrooms, of course, have been washed. Depending where you get your mushrooms, you really should let them kind of just add them to cold water, agitate them slightly, and get them out of that water within 15 to 20 seconds because what ends up happening is that mushroom will suck everything up as far as water, and you're going to have a difficult time to caramelize these mushrooms later. So again, a quick wash, get them out, dry them, and dispose of that water. You can see with these shimiji mushrooms, this base has actually quite a bit of meat in it. Still a lot of mushroom flavor. But the bottom part, where it actually connects at the farm, is a little bit woody and mealy. So what I would say, trim that down, take a moment to trim this down, make sure that you dispose of that. But this little section here should absolutely go into your chicken stock, which is the base of this risotto, okay? I have chicken stock here. I've added the mushroom stems to add more flavor. I might even go as far as looking at some of these button mushrooms. If they seem a little bit brown or dried out the edge, add that to your pot, okay? The chicken leg mushrooms, okay? Same thing, that dry mealy part, perhaps trim away, but this stem goes right in the pot. Zero waste, get all of that flavor working towards the finished dish, okay? Now for these mushrooms, I like to take the cap off at about the 5 cm mark, and then from there start to cut, eighths, little quarters out of it, just to offer some different texture. When your diner eats this, essentially it's a bowl of warm, soft, and juicy rice in a bowl. So we want some texture to kind of break up that experience. For these stems, what I would recommend, go down the center, maybe put a quarter on them, depending on how thick they are, and then just start dicing. Again, a nice thick texture. All of these mushrooms offer their own distinct texture. Some can actually mimic meat in a very easy way. Others have a woody aroma. So try to practice with different types of mushrooms, and you're sure to have great success with your risotto at home. So that's for our mushrooms. The remainder of these we can use for a soup or additional risotto recipes as well. These mushrooms we're going to saute in this pan with a little bit of olive oil. We want to work at rather high heat because as the mushrooms hit the pan, immediately moisture is going to come out of them. And especially if you followed my washing technique of only maximum 20 seconds in the water, this step should be much easier for you. Now, olive oil goes into a hot pan. You want to have a considerable amount of olive oil in there, enough to cover the base. Because once we add this to the pan, that oil is going to start to attack the water and get it evaporated, and that's what we're looking for. We want to cook this down until it's a dark golden brown, okay? So heat goes up. I have salt and pepper here. A little tip for you at home. When you're working with mushrooms, do not add salt at the beginning of the cooking because, again, salt will draw out moisture in your foods, and you're going to have more kind of a wet, stodgy mushroom mix with the addition of salt. Instead, saute them first, get the color that you desire, and then season at the end with pepper and salt. And you're going to find the seasoning is going to be much more on point, and you're going to achieve that color that we desire. So slight smoking coming up. Again, we're using a a good quality olive oil, but definitely not something that's cold pressed here or first pressing. We want something that's a little bit more for cooking, light colored and not too much grassy notes. Okay? So mushrooms are going to start cooking. Let them do their things. We don't need to overcomplicate it. The more you agitate, the more you move your pan, again, the more steam is going to develop and the less browning you're going to have. And keep in mind, when you're working with induction at home, as this pan is, every time you lift it off to look fancy with your sauté or with your stir fry, immediately you're losing heat to your pan, which again is going to create more steam and less browning. So simply keep it on your hob, manage your pan. Once you've added these products in here, continue to manipulate. You know, cooking is about in-the-moment techniques, in-the-moment changes. It's not one setting for the whole cooking process. So as an example, what I mean is, I've added my mushrooms. They've started to take in some of the oil, but I can see there's still a little bit of smoke coming out of here, which tells me the pan is a little bit too hot. So I'm going to adjust my heat to bring it down to a point where I'm not seeing this gray smoke come out, because the gray smoke is a sign that your pan is a little bit overheated and you're going to scorch your product rather than caramelize your product. Caramelizing should take a little bit longer. It should not be dark black. It should be a light golden brown that transitions into a dark honey brown. And that can be applied to onions, and it can be applied to mushrooms. And today, we already got a good step going here. Now again, these mushrooms here, the chicken leg mushrooms, they have a much denser, drier texture, so you're not going to get much water out of them. The button mushrooms, we all know, have a high percentage of water. They can absolutely release quite a bit. But then our shimiji mushrooms, kind of in the middle somewhere, but amazing texture. So depending on what you work with for your mushrooms, you may find that you have to cook them a little bit longer or shorter. Really just go for the look, and you'll know when they're complete, with that dark honey brown. So that's doing its thing. What do we need to do next? Well, let's introduce the remainder of our ingredients. What is a risotto? What makes a great risotto? And potentially what has made maybe some of the bad risottos we've had in the restaurants lately. So, first and foremost, a risotto is very simple. It's a specific type of rice. Today we're using the Arborio rice, which is a shorter grain, but a very high starch content. This Arborio rice will slowly cook with our stock of choice, which today we have chicken stock, with our mushroom pieces inside. Now, as it cooks in this chicken stock, it's going to allow starch to come out of the rice grain and naturally thicken your risotto itself. Now, this is very different than taking any other rice and simply boiling it down, maybe blending it or mashing it to get the rice to actually break down itself to thicken the soup or the risotto. You want to make sure you are using Arborio rice because it will give you the perfect results of leaching out the starch to thicken the residual liquid while still remaining a little bit al dente or firm as a grain. Pardon me, the risotto should not be a porridge. It should be beautiful individual grains of rice enrobed in a nice starchy mixture that has the texture of wet oatmeal. And you'll see that in a moment. Now, when we talk about risotto, of course, a bowl of plain rice is a little bit bland. What we need to do is incorporate big flavors into that, and that can be achieved through the cooking process. Okay? So at the moment, we're caramelizing here. We have a chicken stock with a little bit of herbs. We have our mushroom stems inside. Just let that come to a heat. So as we add it to our risotto in the next step, it's going to maintain the temperature quite consistently. If I have cold stock into hot risotto, what will end up happening is it will inhibit the weight and nature of the starch coming out of your rice, which will kind of prevent the optimum texture that we're looking for. Okay? So we're starting to get golden brown here. That's exactly what we're looking for. Once we achieve that dark honey brown, we'll proceed to the next step. All right, so our mushrooms have achieved that light to dark golden brown. Really from here, we want to move on to adding more layers of flavor, adding to the base that we discussed. So mushrooms are here. You can see there's not too much olive oil there. What I want to do is add just a little bit of butter, okay? And the reason for that is it will help caramelizing in the next step, okay? Butter will come in handy a little bit later, but again, this dish and the richness of this dish is not from the butter itself. Just a touch of butter. We're going to add some garlic and shallot. The reason for adding the garlic and shallot now and not at the beginning of the cooking is that it would simply burn, okay? The mushrooms need about a 10 to 15 minutes to kind of caramelize at a medium-high heat. Once we've added the garlic and shallot, we can reduce down to a medium heat And at this point, once you get the fragrant flavor of the garlic and shallot throughout, we move on to the next step. And our next step is quite straightforward. We have our arborio rice, okay? No need to wash the rice. Don't worry about that. You buy a good quality brand from your supermarket. It will be somewhat polished and ready to use, okay? Arborio is grown in a lot of countries in the world now, but this one comes straight from Italy, okay? Now, the arborio rice goes in. You can see we have a nice amount of butter at the bottom with the toasted garlic. Rice goes in, and what I want to do now is actually coat the rice in this amazing aromatic butter that's at the bottom, okay? Coat every grain and keep it cooking. And at this point, we're ready to move on to the next step, which is working out of our broth. We have our chicken stock ready to go. Our pan is at about medium-high heat. We can add just a touch of salt at the moment. We can add a little bit of pepper. But I would reserve the majority of your seasoning until after we finish the dish, because we're going to introduce some Parmesan cheese and a few other ingredients, which will bring their own seasoning as well. Okay? So, we have toasted rice. It's been about 1 to 2 minutes here. We simply start adding the broth little by little, enough to cover the bottom of our pan. Now that sizzle is a good sound. You want to make sure that your risotto keeps at the simmer period during the whole cooking process. No elevations and dropping in temperature, nice and consistent. Now risotto is not boiling rice in liquid. Risotto is actually manipulating, tricking the rice to take in that liquid while exchanging its starch to thicken. So we've added just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. Continuously stir until that liquid is absorbed and incorporated. And this will slowly leach out all of that starch that we're after. If we were to simply boil the rice in here, you would end up having rice that is, number one, not evenly cooked, but also you would have a broth or liquid inside your risotto that is not evenly thickened either. The water may leach out of it, so on and so forth. So from here, I can scrape the bottom of the pan and the liquid is coming apart. It's slowly absorbed into the rice, okay? We can add a little bit here as well. Now, the risotto as well, you can add some white wine, which I have on the side here. If you want to have alcohol inside, if you're working with kids or maybe you don't prefer to have alcohol, you keep it out as I have today. But inside your recipe, you'll see that it has white wine. I'd recommend that you add the white wine as soon as you get the color on the mushrooms that you like and before you add the butter, okay? Simply cook that white wine down until it's almost dry, and then go ahead and add your butter, shallots, garlic, and continue building your flavors. Now, very often people ask, Nolan, how long will the risotto take? Well, I can't give you a definitive period. It matters on your pan, how many portions you're cooking. Today we're going to cook enough risotto for about 1 portion. Your recipe today is actually for 4 people, so you can make this as an excellent main course for people who, maybe a 4-person dinner party, or use it as an intermediate course for maybe 5 to 6 people. That's the great thing about the risotto is it is quite versatile, great place to feature seasonal ingredients, and you want to make sure you're always working with the best quality ingredients as you can, because there's nowhere to hide here. It's rice, it's mushroom, and we have an amazing stock, and a few ingredients later that we'll finish the dish with as well. So I can smell already the aromas are very pungent. We have an excellent amount of mushroom coming through, a little bit of that garlic and shallot, and just a little bit of nuttiness from that butter that had toasted the rice as well. And this is all flavor, layers of flavor that are going to assist in the profile of your finished dish. Continue to mix, and only when that liquid is taken up do we add more. So we're going to continue this process, adding little bits of liquid, allowing it to take up, continuing on until we find that the rice is firm, but still soft enough to bite into, and we have an excellent amount of starch in our liquid. So that should take about 10 minutes or so. All right, so now we've achieved the thickness that we're looking for. Our rice is about 90% cooked, a bit firm inside, and you can see the texture of our liquid has become a little bit more starchy. Now, it's not completely dry. We still have a bit of broth left in here, but the hydration on our rice is actually plumed up a little bit. It's swollen with all of that mushroom and chicken stock that we've added. From here, I want to reduce the heat. Okay, you go ahead, we add a little bit of salt again, a little bit of pepper, okay, as much as you like. And once you've achieved kind of the thickness that we're looking for here, and again, I can simply pull back with my spoon and see that we have a little bit of residual liquid coming through, but it's not watery. It has a bit of body to it. From there, I want you to turn off your heat, and this is crucial for the next step. If we were to continue boiling this, and we added our next ingredients, the cheese, which is our parmesan and our mascarpone, there's a tendency that the cheese will actually get stretchy, like a pizza cheese, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a little bit of mascarpone cheese here. Okay? This is going to add a nice creaminess to our pasta. We have our aged Parmesan cheese. We have our hot risotto, and we're simply going to grate over the top. The finer the better, because again, we're looking for emulsification. We want that cheese to melt into that liquid without becoming stringy or stretchy. Okay? So allow the cheese to rest for maybe 15-20 seconds so it kind of melts in. And then I want you to start folding in. Okay? Do not mix in circles. Instead, go from the bottom up. Work in that cheese, work in the mascarpone. And again, you can use your pan like this if you're feeling adventurous, or you simply use a rubber spatula and fold from the inside. That folding process will allow the cheese to melt again into your broth without becoming stringy or stretchy. Okay? Now, even in the short period that we've been discussing this technique, our risotto has already seized up a little bit or become a bit too thick. Fear not. We're simply going to add a little bit more chicken stock and allow that risotto to suck it up as we go to the plate. Remember, the distance between plating our dish into your table, the texture of your risotto is actually going to change somewhat. It will firm up again. So you want to have a little bit more loose of a texture similar to this, so that by the time we plate it and it hits your table for your guests, you're going to have nothing but the right texture. Okay? Fresh herbs in the risotto. You can use parsley, you can use basil, whatever you have. Today I'm going to use a bit of fresh basil from our patio at the 6th floor parade. But fresh thyme would be appropriate here. You could use parsley. Really, whatever you have at home would be a great start. Okay. Again, taste one more time for seasoning. More Parmesan cheese I would add before I add salt. Okay. I've not added any more butter here. If you want it extra rich, you could add 1 knob of butter. But never add cream to your risotto, and never add milk. It should really just be the cheese in this case. So risotto goes into the plate. Again, we have this thickened liquid inside. Pick up your plate and just give it a little tap tap on the bottom so that it kind of comes down onto the open plate, and you don't have thick layers, which will actually get very sticky. You want to have one nice even layer of risotto on a very wide plate. So here's your risotto with fresh mushrooms today. We have the Gran Padano and Parmesan cheese inside. The wine that we looked at earlier is optional, but if you want to add it, by all means add it to the sauteed mushrooms once they're done cooking. My name is Nolan from Parade Kitchen. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned for more delicious recipes from the Happy Valley Clubhouse. Thank you very much.